The rain had barely begun to fall when the first scream pierced the air, not from pain, but humiliation. Zaniab's school uniform clung to her body like a soaked shroud, revealing the undeniable swell of her belly beneath. Children shrieked in a mix of mockery and shock as teachers froze, murmurs flooding the assembly like locusts. Her headmistress, once a nurturing figure, turned her face away in disgust, hissing through clenched teeth, "You have brought shame upon us all." Her mother was the first to slap her. The sting wasn't in the force of the palm, but in the hatred buried beneath it. The betrayal that a daughter could hide something so grave from the very womb that bore her. Her father did not speak. He didn't have to. His silence was louder than any rage. In that silence lived abandonment, rejection, and the bitter echo of hypocrisy. A man who had done worse in secret, now condemning his child for being caught. Within hours, Zaniab's name was poisoned. The elders of the village summoned her like a criminal, seated in a half-circle beneath the sacred baobab tree, the place where disputes were judged and destinies were rewritten. They did not ask who the father was. They did not care. They only wanted her to confess to immorality, to beg for forgiveness she didn't believe she owed. One elder said, "You are a warning to our daughters, a stain on the name of this land." She dare not cry. Not then. Not in front of them. She stood with the weight of shame on her back and a child growing in her womb. Her knees shook, but her eyes stayed dry, fixed on the cracked earth beneath her feet, where no mercy would bloom. Even the women, the mothers who had once offered her mangoes and millet, turned their faces. Moral blindness ran through the crowd like a plague, infecting even those who once called her their own. It wasn't just betrayal. It was mass abandonment, fueled by cultural hypocrisy, the kind that forgave powerful men and crucified vulnerable girls. And when the father of the child, the pastor's son, boldly stood in church the next Sunday with a Bible in hand, preaching about sin, not a single person questioned him. No one asked about Zaniab. No one remembered that he had once promised her a future under the same tree where they now condemned her. She watched from a distance as he kissed another girl's hand in front of the altar. By dusk, her parents packed her few belongings in a black nylon bag, dropped it at her feet, and told her to go. She asked, trembling, where? Her mother replied, "To wherever shame sleeps." And so she walked, barefoot, pregnant, alone. She wandered past houses where once she had been fed, offered water, given praise for her bright mind. Now windows shut at her passing. Whispers clawed at her back. Mockery, that venom of small minds, followed her like a shadow. The night thickened. Clouds gathered above like judges unsatisfied with the verdict. The earth was wet with judgment. Every tree, every path seemed unfamiliar, as if the village itself had turned its face. Her body ached, her feet blistered, her womb heavy with impending consequence. Her thoughts spiraled. She remembered how the boy had sworn love under the mango tree, how he had taken what he could never return, how he now stood clean while she bore the evidence of their sin. But deeper than the pain was fear, not of labor, not of death, but of being forgotten, of bringing a child into a world that had already rejected her, of raising someone who might one day look her in the eyes and ask, "Why didn't they love us?" Suddenly, a bolt of lightning tore through the sky, followed by thunder that shook the hills. And as if on cue, her body responded. A searing pain cut through her lower abdomen, her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the wet earth. Her hands clawed at the soil, her teeth clenched against the scream rising in her throat. Labor had begun, but there was no midwife, no warm water, no comforting hand, just the roaring wind, the biting rain, and the lonely cry of a girl who had been abandoned by the world, yet chosen by life to bring forth something sacred. She crawled beneath a rusted roadside shed, holding her belly, praying through clenched teeth. Her tears mixed with the rain. Her breaths became shorter, her sobs deeper. "God," she whispered, "if you are still watching, if I have not become invisible to you too, please not here. Not like this." In the distance, hyenas howled, frogs croaked, and the sky opened its mouth wider. Another pain ripped through her. This time she screamed, the sound lost to the thunder. She was no longer just a girl. She was a vessel on the brink of both destruction and deliverance. And just as her consciousness began to drift, A shadow moved near the shed. Footsteps, soft but approaching. A figure stepped out of the rain, face hidden, voice quiet, and asked, "Are you alone?" The night was heavy with grief and rain, as Zaniab lay curled under the rusted shed that barely shielded her from the storm. The pain ripped through her body in waves, each contraction a cruel reminder of the life she was about to bring into a world that had already rejected her. Her cries echoed into the darkness, swallowed by the thunder, unanswered by humanity. Alone, soaked, and trembling, she bore down with the last strength in her fragile body, the smell of rust and earth thick in her nostrils. It was just past midnight when the child finally emerged, a tiny, slippery, wailing miracle wrapped in blood and mud. The wind stilled for a moment, as if even nature paused to acknowledge what had just happened. Zaniab clutched the baby girl to her chest, her tears mixing with rain, mucus, blood, and overwhelming disbelief. She laughed and sobbed at once, not for joy, but for the ache of survival. She had crossed the threshold from girl to mother, not in a hospital, but in exile. Moments later, when her body gave in to exhaustion, she saw the outline of feet standing near her head. Not the wind this time, not the rain. A human shadow stood silently. Zaniab forced her eyes open, blinking through rain and sweat, to find a tall woman in a dry yellow raincoat, holding an umbrella. "You're lucky she's alive," the woman said coldly. Her accent betrayed a distant city upbringing. There was no warmth in her voice, no admiration for the miracle, just an observation, clinical and calculated. "But luck is temporary. This place will kill her." Zaniab clutched the baby tighter, her maternal instinct already flaring like wildfire. "Who are you?" "Someone who helps girls like you. I work with a foundation that finds lost babies a better life. Real homes, opportunities, safety." The woman crouched, eyeing the newborn. "Let me take her. She won't remember this pain. She'll have clean clothes, education, a future. You have nothing." Zaniab blinked. This woman was offering salvation, a ticket out, a clean escape for the child. But her words were steeped in something else, a condescending belief that poor girls didn't deserve to be mothers. That pain disqualified her. The mornings came like curses. Each sunrise marked another day of hunger, humiliation, and haunting stares. Zaniab wandered the streets with Amara tied to her back in a faded wrapper, the child too young to understand the shame that clung to her mother like a second skin. Her feet burned against sun-scorched tar, but she walked. She walked past people who looked through her, around her, beyond her, but never at her, as if her suffering might infect their comfort. She learned to scavenge before she could beg. Food thrown behind stalls, crusts of yam hardened from sun exposure, half-eaten buns dropped by children too full to care. She breastfed Amara under trees, beside dumpsters, near bus stations where noise muffled her sobs. The once bright girl who dreamed of scholarships and success now fought flies off her child's face while shielding her from the eyes of men who looked too long, too hungrily. The market women were the worst. Each one played judge and jury. There she is again, the disgrace. Feeding a child she should have aborted. She wanted to be a woman too fast. Now, let her suffer. Harlot girl. Even her parents rejected her. Their words cut deeper than knives. But Zaniab never responded, because to speak would cost energy, and she needed every drop of strength to keep her baby alive. One afternoon, she collapsed near a buka, hunger twisting her stomach into knots. Amara cried on her back, weak from thirst. Zaniab could no longer produce enough milk. She lay there, motionless, until a hand tapped her arm. She turned to see an old blind beggar sitting by the wall, his own plate of EBA untouched. "Take it," he said. "God tests those he trusts. Eat, daughter. Feed your child." Tears filled her eyes as she accepted the food, her pride too broken to resist kindness. That day, she whispered thanks to a man who couldn't see her shame, yet offered her dignity. She fed Amara with trembling fingers, promising in silence that one day she would repay this world in kindness, if she survived it. Desperation pushed her to try selling sachet water. She borrowed a cracked tray from a roadside vendor and bought her first bags with the change she had begged. She carried the tray through traffic, shouting, "Pure water." 100 naira. Cold water. But it didn't last. Before she sold 5 sachets, a gang of street boys snatched the tray, laughing as they kicked her to the ground and emptied the contents into the gutter. One stepped on her ankle, mocking, "Water seller turned model mother. Go breastfeed your shame." Zaniab limped away, blood soaking into her wrapper, Amara screaming against her back. She hid behind a pile of refuse, sobbing not from pain, but the realization that every door was locked, every window shut, every light dimmed in a world that had no space for her. Her body weakened with each passing day, but it was Amara who paid the price. The child's eyes lost their sparkle. Her skin turned pale. Her breathing became shallow. At first, Zaniab thought it was the heat, but soon she realized her baby was burning with fever. She rushed to the nearest hospital, barefoot, dusty, and delirious. She screamed at the nurses, begged the receptionist, "Please, my baby, she needs help." But they asked for payment first. No card, no cash, no care. She fell to her knees. "She is dying." The nurse, chewing gum, didn't even look up. "Children die every day." Next, Zaniab sat outside the hospital steps, cradling Amara as the fever spiked. Her vision blurred, her mind fractured. She thought of the woman in the raincoat, thought of how easy it could have been to hand the child away. And for a moment, guilt slithered in. Was she selfish to keep Amara? To trap her in this suffering? But when she looked down, Amara opened her eyes for a second and blinked at her mother. That single blink, that fragile moment of recognition, silenced every doubt. She didn't need a mansion. She needed her mother. She needed loyalty, not luxury. Zaniab rocked her gently, singing lullabies through cracked lips, praying that God would not take the only soul who had loved her without condition. It was then, at the edge of despair, on those filthy hospital steps, that a pair of clean, black heels stopped before her. A perfume cloud followed. Zaniab looked up slowly, expecting judgment. Instead, the woman spoke. Calmly, firmly. "How badly do you want to change your life?" Zaniab stared up at her, heart pounding. The woman extended her hand. "Stand up. But understand this. Change comes with a price." The woman's name was Madame Abiola, but the streets once knew her as Cece Bread. Years ago, she hawked loaves on her head, dodging insults and heat stroke, until she found her way into commerce through the scraps of rejection. She had once been called useless, a disgrace, an embarrassment to her family. But now, she owned 3 shops, 2 delivery bikes, and the respect of people who once spit at her feet. She saw her old self reflected in Zaniab's eyes. The same hunger, the same quiet defiance, the same grief-turned fire. "Your baby is beautiful," she said, cradling Amara. "And so are you. They don't see it now, but they will. If you have a heart to rise, I will help you. But you must promise me one thing. Never worship the money. Worship the growth." Madame Abiola took her in, not to a mansion, but a cramped kiosk behind a provision store she rented to hustlers like herself. She gave her small capital, enough to feed herself for a week and test one business idea. And more than money, she gave her belief, that sacred commodity so many deny the fallen. At first, Zaniab didn't know where to start. She cleaned shelves, washed floors, cooked and listened. Then one day, while watching Madame Abiola mix shea butter with honey and mint for her rough heels, something stirred inside her. It wasn't just the scent. It was the memory. Her grandmother used to make skin balm with village herbs, and Zaniab had helped her mix it as a child. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her hands itched for movement. By morning, she had found leftover shea, coconut oil, and small bottles. She borrowed a burner, melted ingredients together, and watched the mixture harden into a soft cream. It wasn't perfect, but it felt right. She rubbed it on Amara's peeling skin. The child stopped itching within hours. Excited, she made more, adding scent from orange peels and lemon rinds. She sold her first 2 jars to women who saw Amara's smooth cheeks and asked what she used. Zaniab made notes, wrote labels, designed simple wrappers by hand. She called her cream Amara Glow, but the road wasn't smooth. On her 5th batch, she left the burner on too long, and the oil exploded, scalding her arm. She screamed in pain, but didn't drop the pot. She bandaged the burn and kept going. Then came the scammer, a man who posed as a distributor, took 20 jars on credit, and disappeared into thin air. She cried for days, blaming herself. But Madame Abiola reminded her, business will break you before it builds you. Let the pain teach you. Each failure carved resilience in her bones. She learned to track expenses, set prices, market online. She opened a free Instagram account using Madame's phone, posting before and after photos. Orders began trickling in. She walked door to door in the market, offering samples. Some still mocked her, but many were curious. Her creams started to sell. Slowly. By the third month, she had enough savings to rent a wooden stall on the market's edge. Small, hot, but hers. She painted it light blue, hung a small sign, Amara Glow Organics. She worked from dawn till midnight, mixing creams by hand, wrapping bottles with recycled fabric, and whispering affirmations to herself under her breath. You are not the shame they named. You are becoming. For the first time in years, she felt hope blooming. Amara was growing strong. She could buy food without begging. She even saved enough to buy a new wrapper. Not a luxury, but a symbol. When she wore it to the market, some stared, but others complimented her. And Zaniab smiled, because she had earned every thread. She took pictures of customers, thanked them online, offered small discounts for referrals. A local boutique owner reached out, asking for a supply batch. Zaniab cried tears of gratitude. The same street that once broke her was now whispering the beginnings of applause. But pride is often a fragile mask. Behind one smile, jealousy lurked. A rival vendor named Mama Aruka, who once mocked her for being homeless, now watched her stall with narrowed eyes. Zaniab had heard rumors. Some said Mama Aruka accused her of using charm or dark magic to grow her business. Others said she wanted her stall space back. Zaniab ignored them, focusing on her growth, not gossip, until the night it all went dark. She returned late from a delivery run, Amara asleep on her back, her mind full of dreams for tomorrow. But as she neared the market, she smelled it. Burnt wood, scorched plastic, ash. She dropped her basket and ran. Her stall was gone. Nothing remained but blackened metal, shattered jars, and smoke still rising into the night sky. Neighbors watched from afar, some with sympathy, others with satisfaction. She collapsed to her knees, shaking. From the shadows, a familiar voice whispered, "Next time, stay in your place." Ashes still clung to her skin when Zaniab tried to piece together what had happened. Her stall, months of sweat, scars, and silent prayers, was gone in a single night. While others saw a fire, she smelled intention. Arson carries a scent of purpose. Her instincts pointed at jealousy, but the truth that awaited her was far crueler. It wasn't Mama Ruka or any of the other envious vendors. It was someone much closer, someone whose betrayal would leave a scar deeper than any burn. Her name was Dami. Zaniab had once called her sister. Dami had offered her help when no one else would. She was the one who introduced her to the landlady, vouched for her to rent the stall, helped her organize her first sales. They had shared roasted corn on lean nights, laughed over spilled oils, cried over the cruelty of gossip. In Dami, Zaniab thought she had found the one friend who saw her pain without judgment, who listened without pity. But beneath Dami's smiles had grown a silent envy, the slow, rotting kind that eats affection from the inside out. It wasn't until a neighbor, half drunk on palm wine, confessed that Zaniab knew. Your friend Dami said you needed to be taught a lesson, that you were starting to forget where you came from. She said she did it for your own good. Zaniab felt the world tilt. That night, she went to Dami's room. Her fists trembled, not from rage, but disbelief. Dami opened the door casually, chewing on groundnuts. "Oh, it took you long enough. You burned my shop." Dami shrugged. "I didn't light the match. I just told someone to help humble you. You needed it." Zaniab stepped back, as if her body couldn't contain the betrayal. "Why? We were sisters. I trusted you. I told you things I never even told Abiola." Dami's expression twisted into contempt. "That was your mistake. You started walking around like you were special, posting your creams online like you're one of those Instagram queens. You forgot who you were. You forgot the rest of us, still struggling. I never looked down on anyone. I was just trying to survive." "Exactly. And your survival started making the rest of us look weak. You outgrew your pain too fast. You forgot that some of us are still stuck in ours. Zaniab couldn't breathe. The betrayal wasn't just in the act, but in the reasoning. It was the selfishness disguised as fairness, the bitterness dressed as justice. She realized now that Dami had never wanted her to win. She wanted her to remain small, dependent, pitiful. As long as Zaniab stayed broken, Dami could feel strong. She walked away without another word, her soul hollowed by heartbreak. The fire had taken her business, but Dami had taken something far more precious, her trust in people. The next morning, the whispers began. Voices spoke in corners. Eyes followed her again. Not with sympathy this time, but glee. The old chorus had returned. She thought she could rise. Now see her. That one was moving too fast. Life has slowed her down. Humbled, as she should be. She tried to rebuild, using leftover jars and burnt tools, selling in small corners where no one knew her name. But Dami wasn't finished. One night, Zaniab awoke to her phone buzzing. Dozens of messages, alerts, notifications. Confused, she opened her inbox. Then she froze. Screenshots, pictures, passages. Dami had stolen her old diary, one she had buried deep in the back of a broken drawer. It was filled with fears, private prayers, secrets she had written when Amara cried at night, and she questioned if she could go on. Her doubts, her moments of shame, her confession that she once wished she had given the baby up just to stop the pain. And now it was online, posted on a gossip page, shared by hundreds, people commenting, mocking. So the perfect cream seller wanted to abandon her child. Fake life, acting holy while hiding trash. She wrote she hated her baby. How can a mother think that? Zaniab clutched Amara to her chest, her body shaking. The child looked up, confused, still too young to understand that the world had just turned on her mother again. The pain wasn't in the exposure. It was in the distortion. They didn't see her repentance, her growth, her healing. They only saw a moment frozen in ink. And worst of all, they didn't see the context. They didn't see the night Amara almost died of fever, or the days Zaniab went without eating to feed her. They didn't know the cost of her strength. She cried, deep, silent tears, not for herself, but for the innocence of a daughter who would one day Google her mother's name and find filth dressed as truth. Just then, an email arrived from skincare influencer. Saw your story. Let's talk. You're stronger than you think. The world outside continued to move, but inside her room, time had stopped. Zaniab locked the door and drew the curtains, plunging the small space into a suffocating gloom. The mirror that once reflected her resilience now showed a hollow stranger. Plates of untouched food gathered on the floor, the air thick with the sour smell of despair. For 3 days, she neither bathed nor ate. Grief sat beside her like an unwelcome friend, whispering cruel reminders of all she had lost. Every corner of the room echoed memories. Burnt wood from her destroyed stall, the scent of oil she once mixed with pride, the faint sound of Amara's laughter that now seemed distant, fragile, fleeting. Her body was present, but her spirit had withdrawn to a place where pain had no language, only silence. The world had mocked her, her trust had been betrayed, and her dreams were now ashes in the rain. Betrayal had not just stolen her livelihood, it had stripped her of her identity. Amara, barely 4 years old, wandered the room with her doll, whispering to it, as though trying to fill the silence her mother refused to break. When she finally looked up and saw Zaniab's tears, she touched her face gently. "Mama, please don't cry again." The words struck like lightning, not because they were loud, but because they came from innocence trying to comfort brokenness. Zaniab wanted to respond, but her throat betrayed her. Words gathered and died in her mouth. She felt guilt like a blade twisting in her chest. Her daughter, her only light, was watching her fade. The irony was cruel. She had fought the world to keep this child alive, only to show her what hopelessness looked like. Night came again, and with it, ghosts of her past. She began to hear them clearly. Voices of teachers who once called her brilliant, friends who once praised her smile, parents who cursed her name, villagers who condemned her womb. "You brought shame. You'll never be anything. No man will ever love a girl like you. You thought you could rise." The voices layered, blending into a single chorus of condemnation. Zaniab clutched her head, rocking back and forth, whispering, Stop. Please stop. But the more she begged, the louder they became. She saw flashes in her mind. The slap from her mother, the betrayal in Dammy's eyes, the laughter of men at the market, the fire that devoured her hope. She saw the face of the pastor's son, smiling at another woman while she starved. In that moment, pain became physical, a weight pressing on her chest until she could no longer breathe. When dawn came, she stood by the window, eyes hollow, watching a world that seemed untouched by her suffering. People laughed, cars honked, birds sang. Life continued as though her agony meant nothing. That was when the thought entered her mind, quietly, seductively, like a whisper from somewhere dark. What if it all just stopped? What if peace meant silence? She found herself walking. She didn't remember putting on her shoes or tying her wrapper. She just walked, past the market, past the bridge where she once hawked water, past the same river that had watched her give birth in the rain. The world blurred. The sounds dulled. Her only clarity was the bridge ahead. She stood at the edge, staring down at the murky water swirling below. The current looked inviting, like a promise of release. The pain would end, the voices would stop, the shame would sink into silence. Her hands trembled as she gripped the railing. The cold iron bit into her palms. She whispered through tears, "Maybe this is mercy." Behind her, a small voice broke the wind. "Mama." Zaniab froze. The sound was soft, uncertain, terrified. She turned slowly, and there stood Amara, barefoot, her small dress flapping in the breeze. Tears streamed down the child's face. "Mama, I'm scared." Those words shattered her completely. They weren't just fear. They were faith begging not to be abandoned. Zaniab's knees buckled. She fell to the ground, clutching Amara to her chest, crying until she couldn't feel her own breath. She rocked her daughter, whispering apologies she couldn't count. "I'm sorry, my baby. I'm sorry. I just wanted the pain to stop. I didn't mean to leave you." Amara's tiny hands cupped her face, her touch innocent yet divine. "Don't leave me, Mama. Please don't go away." Zaniab realized then that the darkness she carried wasn't meant to end her. It was meant to break her open, to reveal what still lived within her despite the ruins. Love. Love that refused to die, no matter how cruel life became. In that moment, she saw it clearly. The true blindness wasn't physical, it was moral and emotional. The world had eyes but no sight, people who judged but never understood. And here, in the trembling arms of her child, she rediscovered her vision. As she held Amara tightly, a voice came from behind them. Deep, steady, compassionate. "I was once here too," the voice said, resonant against the whispering wind. "But I turned around." Zaniab turned, her heart racing. A tall figure stepped out of the shadow, his face hidden beneath the bridge's dim light, his eyes reflecting something she hadn't seen in a long time: understanding. The man who stepped out from beneath the bridge was not what Zaniab expected. His clothes were simple, his beard graying, and his eyes heavy with stories untold. He moved with a quiet strength, a calmness that carried the weight of battles already fought. When he spoke, his tone carried no judgment, only understanding. "I was once here too," he repeated softly. "I thought ending it would free me, but it would have only transferred my pain to someone else." His name was Jonah. Years ago, he had been a convict, imprisoned for armed robbery after losing everything to greed and betrayal. He told her how his thirst for quick wealth had cost him his family, his friends, and his freedom. In prison, he found faith, purpose, and truth, discovering that blindness wasn't just about losing sight, but about losing moral direction. "You can't heal by hating yourself," he told her. "You can only heal by facing yourself." Zaniab listened, still clutching Amara, tears streaking her face. The man sat beside her, looking out over the water, as if watching his own reflection from another lifetime. "Pain," he said slowly, "isn't punishment. It's preparation. What feels like loss might be the soil for your rise, but only if you choose to plant something in it." Those words pierced through the fog of despair, clouding her heart. For the first time in months, she felt something shift, a spark of understanding, faint but alive. Jonah didn't offer her money, or pity, or promises. He offered truth. And truth, she realized, was the foundation she had lost somewhere along the way. Over the next weeks, Jonah became her mentor. He taught her discipline, how to wake early, write her plans, and treat her dreams like appointments with destiny. He taught her marketing, not the kind done with glitter and slogans, but the kind that told a story. People don't buy products, he said. They buy transformation. Tell them how your pain became your purpose. He helped her see that success wasn't about escaping struggle. It was about mastering it. Under his guidance, she began rebuilding her confidence brick by brick, learning to forgive, to focus, and to fight again. But true healing required more than lessons. It required letting go. One morning, Jonah took her to the old village cemetery. The air was thick with memories and the distant hum of cicadas. Together, they found her mother's grave, a small stone, half sunken into the earth. Zaniab knelt, fingers trembling, tracing the engraved name. For years, she had carried the bitterness of abandonment like armor, believing forgiveness would weaken her. But now she saw that forgiveness wasn't surrender, it was release. She whispered, "Mama, I understand now. You were scared, not cruel. You were broken too." Tears soaked the soil as she laid a single white flower on the grave. In that moment, something inside her lifted. The chains of resentment loosened. Her mother's voice, once an echo of shame, became a memory of strength. When they returned to the city, a surprise awaited her. Madame Abiola, the woman who had first helped her years ago, appeared at Jonah's center, her smile radiant as ever. "You disappear, my girl," she said, embracing her tightly. "But I always knew the fire and you hadn't gone out." Abiola had since expanded her business empire and now ran a women's empowerment fund. "I have seen your name online," she said proudly. "Your creams, your story, it's everywhere. People love your courage. I want to invest. Let's rebuild Amara Glow." Zaniab could hardly breathe. The woman who once gave her a week's worth of hope was now offering a future. With Abiola's capital and Jonah's mentorship, Zaniab found herself reborn into a new chapter, one built not from pity but from perseverance. They rented a small workshop, bought proper equipment, and hired 3 other single mothers to help. Each jar of cream became a testimony, a blend of humility, compassion, and redemption. She named her brand again, this time with deliberate reverence. Amara Glow, beauty from the ashes. The label carried her daughter's name and her own journey. It wasn't just a skincare line. It was a symbol of rebirth. Her marketing told her story, not as tragedy, but as triumph. Every post, every caption carried the heartbeat of survival. People resonated with her truth, and orders began to pour in from every corner of the country. She invested in social media campaigns, collaborated with influencers, and filmed tutorials about natural beauty and self-worth. Jonah helped her write her speeches. Abiola handled logistics. Slowly, Amara Glow became more than a business. It became a movement. Women from different towns share their stories, inspired by hers. She was no longer the girl who gave birth under a bridge. She was now a voice of resilience, teaching others that broken beginnings could bloom into brilliance. But success, as Jonah warned her, has its own tests. The same world that ignored her pain now envied her rise. Rivals whispered that she used charms to attract customers. Competitors began copying her labels. Then came the first legal notice, a letter accusing her of trademark theft, signed by a powerful cosmetic company she had never even heard of. Her hands trembled as she read the words, fear creeping up her spine. Was someone trying to destroy her again? That night, she sat in the dark, her laptop glowing, the sound of notifications buzzing nonstop. Orders kept flooding in. Messages of support filled her inbox, but so did threats. Her heart raced as she realized the storm was returning. Only this time, she wasn't the same broken girl from the past. This was a different battlefield. As she scrolled through her emails, a new message appeared from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "You think you've won, but this is only the beginning." When Zaniab received the lawsuit, fear tried to drag her back into the pit she had fought so hard to escape. The letter was filled with legal jargon and intimidation, claiming her brand name, Amara Glow, violated another company's trademark. It was a deliberate attempt to crush her spirit, a test of strength disguised as formality. But this time, she was not the trembling girl who hid from storms. she was the storm itself. Jonah and Madame Abiola encouraged her to fight. They found a young lawyer who believed in her story and agreed to represent her at a fraction of the cost. For weeks, she gathered documents, receipts, registrations, proof that Amara Glow was her creation, born not from greed but from grace. The court hearing was tense. The opposing company arrived with polished lawyers and arrogance thicker than perfume. They expected her to crumble. Instead, Zaniab stood tall in her simple Ankara dress, clutching Amara's hand, her voice steady as she testified about her journey. The bridge birth, the betrayal, the rebuilding. The courtroom fell silent. Her truth was too raw, too human to dismiss. When the verdict was finally read, the judge ruled in her favor. Amara Glow was legally and rightfully hers. The victory felt like sunlight breaking through years of rain. Jonah wept quietly in the back row, while Madame Abiola held her hand and whispered, "You've not just defended your name, you've reclaimed your destiny." From that day, Zaniab's rise was unstoppable. News outlets picked up her story. Headlines called her the girl who refused to fall. A popular journalist interviewed her on live television, her words resonating with millions across the continent. She spoke about pain and perseverance, about faith and forgiveness, about how poverty and shame can blind people to the value of compassion. True beauty, she said, is not found in mirrors but in mercy. That line became a viral quote, painted on billboards and shared across social media. Influencers began promoting Amara Glow products. Customers posted before and after photos, calling her creams magic from heaven. Demand exploded. Orders flooded in from Lagos, Accra, Nairobi, and Johannesburg. Distributors begged to stock her line. Within 6 months, she opened a second store, then a third, and soon, a small factory. But even as her accounts swelled with her first £1,000,000, she refused to forget where she came from. Her first act as a business owner was to hire single mothers, women who had been shunned, humiliated, and silenced by the same moral blindness that once destroyed her. She trained them, paid fair wages, and built a daycare beside the factory so they could work with dignity while their children played nearby. She called them Sisters of Strength. For every jar of cream sold, a portion went to a fund that helped abandoned women start small businesses. What had once been her shame had now become her ministry. The transformation was breathtaking. Markets that once mocked her now celebrated her. The same women who once spat at her feet now asked to take selfies with her, their smiles hiding the shame of old gossip. The same men who ridiculed her for being a teenage mother now called her Madame Zaniab, their tone dripping with respect and envy. She handled it with humility, never seeking revenge, though she could have. Instead, she smiled and said softly, "We all learn at our own pace." Yet, as success grew, the world began to change around her. Invitations poured in for conferences, product fairs, and television appearances. She stood before cameras with poise, speaking about entrepreneurship, forgiveness, and moral courage. Behind her elegance, however, was the quiet discipline Jonah had instilled in her. The routine of gratitude, the humility of reflection, the refusal to let wealth blind her. She often repeated Jonah's lesson. Money tests character more than poverty ever could. Still, success came with shadows. Anonymous messages whispered of competitors plotting her downfall. One evening, a reporter emailed her claiming to have discovered something shocking about her past. For the first time in months, she felt that old tremor of fear. She thought of the diary Dammy had once leaked, the mockery, the hate. But when she opened the file, she was surprised. It wasn't a scandal. It was her full story. The reporter had tracked her life from the bridge, where she gave birth, to the courtroom, where she reclaimed her name. The article, titled "The Girl Who Refused to Fall," became the most read piece of the year. Suddenly, brands wanted a partner. Her story was featured on national television. Sales tripled. International investors began reaching out. And through it all, she remained grounded, always crediting Jonah and Abiola, always reminding people that Amara was the meaning behind it all, grace. Zaniab's life had become the very opposite of what the world once prophesied. Where there had been mockery, there was now admiration. Where there had been exile, there was now belonging. Where there had been ashes, there was now light. She often walked through the same market where she once begged, just to remind herself of how far she had come. And whenever she passed the blind beggar who once gave her food, she placed an envelope in his hands. Inside, always, was more than money. It was gratitude, sealed with memory. But as every rise invites its own storm, fate was preparing another test. One late evening, after overseeing her factory's first large export shipment, she returned home exhausted but fulfilled. Amara, now 7, ran into her arms, laughing. "Mama, they said your cream is in London now." Zaniab laughed too, tears of joy stinging her eyes. She was living proof that broken beginnings could lead to beautiful destinies. Then, as she tucked Amara into bed, the doorbell rang. She opened the door slowly, expecting a delivery man, or perhaps Jonah. But standing before her was a man she never thought she'd see again. His suit was polished, his smile carefully rehearsed, but his eyes betrayed the weight of years. It was him, Amara's father. He smiled faintly and said, "You've done well, Zaniab, but you owe me a share of what we started." He stood on her doorstep with the same arrogance he wore the day he denied her pregnancy. But now his suit was sharper, his tone rehearsed, his intentions coded in legal menace. "You've done well, Zaniab," he said with a cold smirk, "but you owe me a share of what we started." Her chest tightened. What they started. There was no they. Only her, bleeding in the rain, giving birth alone, raising a daughter without help, building a business from grief and dust. She stared at him, stunned by the boldness of his entitlement. Before she could speak, he handed her an envelope. Inside was a legal summons. He was suing her for 50% ownership of Amara Glow, claiming he was the biological father, and therefore entitled to half of the company birth from their child. The hypocrisy was nauseating. Zaniab's hands trembled as she read the document. His lawyers accused her of using his bloodline to gain sympathy, of defaming him through her story, and of illegally building wealth on his genetic contribution. It wasn't just greed. It was betrayal masquerading as justice. The same man who vanished when she needed him most now wanted a cut of her healing. The news broke within days. Tabloids splashed headlines, "Skincare Queen and Paternity Scandal," and "The Man Behind Amara Glow Speaks Out." Talk shows debated her credibility. Online commenters turned cruel. Some called her manipulative. Others accused her of using her child as a branding tool. Videos of her speeches were edited to cast doubt on her morals. The pressure was suffocating. She sat in her office with Jonah and Madame Abiola, the three of them trying to hold the storm at bay. Jonah paced the room, jaw clenched. "This is a weaponized lie. He wants to break you publicly because he couldn't break you privately." Abiola added softly, "Men like him don't want children. They want control. And the law, unfortunately, gives them room to try." But the worst came not from the courts or the media. It came from her daughter. Amara sat on the couch one night, legs tucked under her, eyes wide with confusion. She held her mother's old diary, the one that had once been leaked and now was kept hidden in a box. "Mama," she asked gently, "is that man really my father?" The question sliced through Zaniab like a blade. She knelt beside her daughter, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "Yes," she whispered, "but being a father is not about blood. It's about presence, about protection, about love." Amara's eyes glistened. "Did he ever love us?" Zaniab swallowed hard. "No, but you were never unloved. Never." She spent the night awake, replaying the past, the day he had laughed at her tears, the way he stood in church pretending innocence, the silence when she begged for help. She remembered thinking he was the one. The betrayal had crushed more than her body. It had broken her spirit. And now he wanted to benefit from what he once discarded. Her lawyer advised a paternity test. "It's the only way to quiet the noise," she said. "And make this about facts, not speculation." Zaniab hesitated. She knew Amara was his child. She never denied it. But to put her daughter through public scrutiny again felt like sacrificing her innocence to appease public opinion. Still, the attacks grew louder. She received threats. Her factory was vandalized. Sponsors began to pull out. The story was bleeding her brand. Finally, the court issued a dramatic decision. A public DNA test would be conducted, followed by a televised hearing to settle both the paternity and ownership claims. The case had grown too large for a closed courtroom. The public demanded a spectacle, and the system delivered. The day before the hearing, she sat with Amara on the balcony, watching the sunset. The child leaned on her shoulder. "Mama, are you scared?" Zaniab looked into the horizon, her voice steady. "Yes, but not of him. I'm scared that this world values lies more than truth. But I know something stronger than fear. Your name, your light, your story." The next morning, the court was packed. Cameras hovered like vultures, flashes blinding her as she entered with her head high. He arrived in a sleek black car, waving at the cameras like a politician. She stood opposite him, holding Amara's hand, her spirit steady even as her heart ached. The judge announced the proceedings. The paternity test results had arrived. Silence swallowed the courtroom. The judge raised the sealed envelope and said, "These results will determine the future of Amara Glow and reveal the truth this nation is waiting to hear." The courtroom pulsed with electricity. Cameras clicked like hailstones, reporters whispered into microphones, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Outside, crowds pressed against the barricades, chanting, holding signs that bore her name and face. Social media platforms were on fire, hashtags trending globally. Hashtag Zania versus the past. Hashtag Amara Glow Truth. Hashtag Justice for Mothers. For the first time, a personal fight had become a national conversation. Zaniab stood still at the center of it all, her head wrapped in soft purple osso oak, a symbol of both royalty and mourning. Her eyes held the calm of storms survived. Beside her, Amara sat quietly, her small hands folded, her innocence a contrast to the chaos swirling around them. The judge cleared his throat and opened the sealed envelope. The world held its breath. The paper crackled like thunder as it unfolded. The DNA test confirms with 99.98% certainty that the plaintiff, Mr. Adewale Okonkwo, is the biological father of the child, Amara Zaniab. A gasp swept through the room. Adewale smiled smugly, his lawyers nodding in premature victory. But the judge hadn't finished. However, the judge continued, "This court is also tasked with assessing the claim for 50% ownership of Amara Glow and whether the plaintiff contributed to the company's creation or child's upbringing in any meaningful way." Zaniab stepped forward. Her voice was clear, neither bitter nor broken. "Yes, he is the biological father. But fatherhood is not measured in DNA. It is measured in presence, in protection, in sacrifice." She turned to the gallery and addressed the court, her voice rising with passion. "Where was he when I gave birth under a bridge? When I begged for hospital care? When I was mocked, starved, and dragged through the dirt? When I built this brand from burned stalls and broken dreams?" She held up a faded photo, herself cradling Amara, soaked in rain. "This is what fatherhood looked like in my world. Alone, cold, desperate. He cannot return now and claim the glory of what he abandoned." A journalist stood up in the gallery and held up her published feature, "The Girl Who Refused to Fall." The crowd erupted. "She built this. She is the mother and the maker. Amara Glow is hers." Adewale tried to interrupt, but his voice was swallowed by the roar of support. He turned to the judge, desperate, grasping for control. Zaniab turned to Amara. "My child, if you ever wonder where your story began, remember this. It began with truth, not wealth. With love, not entitlement. With us, surviving, not depending." Tears ran down Amara's cheeks as she rushed into her mother's arms. She hugged her tightly and whispered, "You are all I need." The judge struck the gavel. Ownership remains solely with Ms. Zaniab Adebayo. Custody and all parental decisions remain with her. This case is dismissed. The cameras flashed like lightning. Adewale collapsed into a chair, face in his hands. The courtroom that once watched silently now clapped, some cheering, others crying. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was a cultural reckoning. The system had finally sided with truth over biology, with presence over pride. As Zaniab exited the courtroom, reporters surrounded her. One thrust a microphone forward, asking, "What do you want the world to know after this victory?" She paused, looking directly into the camera. "That no one should ever be ashamed of rising from brokenness. That being abandoned does not make you worthless. That true family is built, not claimed. and that the world must learn to honor those who stay, not those who return when the work is done. By the time she returned home, her phone was vibrating with notifications. A private message stood out among the rest, marked urgent, from a verified account. It was from the CEO of an international cosmetics conglomerate. She clicked it open. The message read, "We followed your story, your brand, your integrity. We believe Amara Glow has global potential. Let's talk about a Billionaire acquisition offer, with you remaining as creative director and global face." As she stared at the screen in disbelief, Amara walked in and asked, "Mama, what's a billion?" The offer glowed on her screen like a golden ticket. 1 billion naira, full acquisition, lifetime royalties, and a global ambassador role. For any entrepreneur, it was a dream. For Zaniab, it was a crossroads. That night, she sat in silence with the weight of the world pressing gently on her shoulders. She could sign the paper and walk into generational wealth. But something deeper called her. A memory, a vow made in the rain beside a shed, clutching a child wrapped in rags. She remembered Jonah's words, "Don't sell your scars. Build with them." And Abiola's legacy is greater than luxury. She closed the laptop, called the company the next morning, and politely declined. "I am honored," she said calmly, "but Amara Glow is more than a product. It is a promise to every girl who has been abandoned, mocked, or broken. I cannot sell what was born in pain and nurtured in faith. I will grow it. Myself." The news shocked the business world. Commentators called her foolish. Analysts said she let emotion rule. But something strange happened. Her following doubled overnight. Customers began posting messages of pride, calling her the queen who said no. Media outlets pivoted. Forbes Africa featured her on the cover with the headline, "Legacy over Luxury, the Rise of Zaniab Adebayo." That single decision changed everything. International distributors offered partnerships instead of buyouts. Her story was translated into multiple languages. Amara Glow launched in London, Paris, Nairobi, and Johannesburg. Within a year, her products were on the shelves of the world's most prestigious beauty stores. She was invited to speak at women's conferences in Dubai, Morocco, and New York. But she never lost sight of her roots. She took her profits and founded the Grace Within Foundation, named after her daughter. It offered shelter, training, and microloans to young single mothers across Nigeria. Her team designed mobile clinics that reached remote areas where teen mothers had been forgotten. Every hospital she built had a wing named Amara's Room, where no girl would ever be turned away for lack of money. One morning, she received a letter. The handwriting was shaky, almost unreadable. It was from her father. They had not spoken since the day he threw her out. She unfolded the paper with trembling hands. "My daughter, I watched you on TV last week. I could barely recognize you. Not because you've changed, but because I have finally removed the shame from my eyes. I was blind, not with my sight, but with my pride. I hurt you. I failed you. And I have carried that pain for years. Please forgive me. If you still carry space in your heart for an old fool, I would like to meet my granddaughter and apologize face to face." She wept, not because the letter healed everything, but because it acknowledged the wound. Weeks later, she returned to her childhood village. Not in a convoy, not with a camera crew, just with Amara and a box of donated books. The same elders who once condemned her now greeted her with trembling hands and lowered eyes. She embraced them, offered forgiveness, and announced the construction of a new community center, equipped with a school, a clinic, and a mentoring program for girls. She said nothing of their cruelty. She didn't need to. Her presence was the rebuke. Her compassion was the correction. She rewrote the laws of her land. With her influence, she lobbied for better legal protection for young mothers, mandatory paternity acknowledgement, and increased healthcare access for pregnant teens. Legislators listened, not because she begged, but because her story made them accountable. 1 year later, at her newly built factory, she stood on a stage with her staff, each one a woman society had once thrown away. She honored Jonah and Abiola with awards that bore their names. She knelt in gratitude as Amara, now 10, handed her a bouquet and whispered, "You did it, Mama." That night, as fireworks lit up the sky, her phone buzzed with a new notification. An email. It bore the seal of the United Nations. Subject: Keynote Invitation, Global Women's Forum. Message: We invite you to deliver the keynote address at the United Nations General Assembly in New York City to speak on the theme, Resilience, Redemption, and Rewriting the Future. Your story has inspired millions. The world needs your voice. As she stared at the invitation, heart full, Amara placed a crown made of flowers on her head and whispered, "Now the world will know what I've always known. You are a queen." The lights in the United Nations Hall dimmed as Zaniab stepped forward, her daughter's hand firmly in hers. She wore a floor-length gown made of ankara and silk, colors woven to symbolize grace and endurance. The applause had not yet begun, but every eye in the room was already fixed on her. Delegates from around the world, global dignitaries, journalists, and activists leaned forward in anticipation. She paused for a moment, taking in the moment, remembering every bridge, betrayal, and scar that had led her here. Amara stood beside her, a small, composed reflection of the woman she had watched survive, stumble, and soar. The little girl who once asked, "Mama, are we going to die?" now looked up at her mother, as if she were the sun itself. Zaniab began. "They said I was finished, that I had ruined my life at 17, that no one would love a girl like me, that shame would follow me until the end. But they were wrong. I was not finished. I was just beginning." A hush fell over the hall. Her voice was steady, but every word throbbed with memory. "They told me that giving birth under a bridge made me unworthy. But that child, that moment, that was the foundation of my purpose. I did not rise in spite of that night. I rose because of it. My daughter gave me vision before I even found my voice." She looked down at Amara, and for a second, her composure wavered. But she continued, "Let me tell you something I've learned. Rejection doesn't define you. Your decisions do. Pain is real. Shame is loud. But so is love. So is grace. And if you hold on long enough, if you choose truth over revenge, love over bitterness, purpose over popularity, you will rise." She paused, eyes scanning the room. "I thank those who helped me. Madame Abiola, who gave me capital and courage. Jonah, who gave me discipline and dignity. The blind man who gave me his last food when I had no name, no home, and no hope. And yes," her voice thickened, "I thank those who hurt me, because they revealed who I was when I had nothing left to hide. They exposed my fears and forced me to discover my strength." There was silence, but it was not emptiness. It was reverence. "People think success is about applause," she said, "but real success is who claps for you when the crowd leaves, who holds your hand when you fail, who stays when you fall. That's wealth. That's legacy." She stepped away from the podium and looked again at Amara. "Do you remember when you asked me, 'What's a billion?' I'll tell you now. A billion is not money. It is love multiplied. It is every girl who will never feel alone because of Amara Glow. It is every child whose mother is no longer ashamed. It is every law changed, every life restored." Suddenly, the audience rose. One by one. No one moved to clap. Not at first. They stood in awe. And then, as if a single invisible conductor raised their arms, they erupted into applause. Not polite claps, not diplomatic appreciation, but thunder. Hands slapping together with force, with faith, with celebration. Eyes filled with tears. Some delegates sobbed openly. Others clutched their hearts. Amara hugged her mother tightly. "I love you, Mama." Zaniab whispered back, "You are why I never gave up." That night, a new chapter began, not just for her, but for every girl who would now believe in her worth, no matter how deeply the world tried to bury it. And now, to every viewer watching, she speaks to you. What did you learn from her story? Have you ever felt abandoned, broken, or misunderstood? What choices pulled you from darkness into light? Let her journey remind you that you're never too low to rise. That truth will always come to light. That real wealth is not in what you own, but in who you become. If this story touched you, leave your thoughts in the comments. What part broke you? What part healed you? Like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable African stories. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a journey that reminds us all. Grace lives where truth walks.